never used to believe in those stories about people disappearing in the woods. The ones where they say something got them. I always thought those were just campfire tales, meant to scare kids and keep them from wandering too far from home. But after what happened to me, I don't think I'll ever step foot in the forest again. This took place last year. I had gone on a solo hiking trip, something I'd done dozens of times before. I wasn't some amateur. I knew how to navigate, how to pack for survival, how to respect the land. But nothing prepared me for what I encountered. The first day started off normal. The drive up the mountain was peaceful, the kind of trip where you roll the windows down and breathe in the fresh pine air. The sun was bright, the sky was clear. I had mapped out a remote spot deep in the mountains, a place with no cell service, no nearby roads, just untouched wilderness. That was the appeal. I wanted isolation. I hiked for hours deep into the woods, following an old unmarked trail that I'd read about in a forum. It was supposed to lead to an incredible clearing, a place few people had ever seen. The deeper I went, the quieter it got. At first I didn't think much of it, but after a while I noticed something felt off. No birds, no insects, no wind, just silence. It was like the forest itself was holding its breath. That was the first time I felt it. That creeping sensation on the back of my neck, like I was being watched. I told myself it was just my imagination, that I was overthinking. I kept walking. By the time I reached the clearing, the sun was already starting to set. It was beautiful, a wide open patch of land surrounded by towering pines, with a small lake in the distance, the kind of place you'd see on a postcard. I set up camp, made a fire, cooked some food. As the sky darkened, I sat by the flames listening to the crackling wood. That's when I heard it, a low whistle. It came from somewhere in the trees beyond my camp. At first I thought it was just the wind slipping through the branches, but the whistle was too deliberate, too human. I called out, "Hello? Anyone there?" Silence. Then another whistle, closer this time. I felt my stomach tighten. My brain struggled to rationalize it. Maybe a bird? Maybe the wind? But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. Trying to ignore the unease creeping into my bones, I zipped myself inside my tent and forced myself to sleep. I woke up suddenly. At first I wasn't sure why, then I realized I wasn't alone. I could hear it breathing, just outside my tent. Deep, slow, not human. My heart hammered in my chest. I didn't move, I didn't make a sound, I just listened. The breathing was right there, inches from the fabric of my tent. Slow inhales, long exhales, then came the whistle. Right next to me, I clenched my jaw, squeezing my eyes shut, willing myself to stay still. And then it pressed against the tent, not a hand, not a paw, something long, thin, sliding down the fabric slowly, like it was tracing the outline of my body inside. I stopped breathing. I don't know how long I stayed like that, frozen in terror. Then finally, the breathing stopped. Footsteps, slow, heavy, moving away from my tent, into the trees. I laid there, heart pounding in my throat until the sun came up. At sunrise, I finally unzipped my tent and stepped outside. I expected to see nothing, but I was wrong. There were tracks, not boot prints, not animal tracks, something else. They were long, deep, too big, too elongated, like a person's footprints, but wrong. The tracks circled my tent. Whatever it was, it had been watching me, waiting. I packed up fast. I wasn't going to spend another night out there. I started hiking back towards civilization. I was exhausted, but I pushed forward. The sun was out, everything felt safer. Until I heard it again, the whistle. This time, it wasn't behind me. It was ahead of me. I stopped. My hands started shaking. How? I hadn't seen anyone. No signs of people for miles. I took a step back, and that's when I saw it, standing in the trees ahead of me. A figure, tall, wrong. Its limbs were too long, its face blurred like it wasn't fully there. And when it whistled this time, I swear to God, I felt it inside my skull. Then it moved. Not like a person, it bent, twisted, disappearing into the trees like a spider slipping into a crack. I turned and ran. I didn't care about the trail anymore. I didn't care about my bearings. I just ran. The next thing I remember, I was waking up on the side of a highway, bruised, disoriented. My backpack was missing. I had no memory of how I got there. The driver stopped and asked if I needed help. I told them I was fine, but I wasn't. I got home, but I didn't sleep for days. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard it, the whistle. Nobody believes me. They say I probably got lost, hallucinated from dehydration. But I know what I heard, I know what I saw, and I know that somewhere, deep in those woods, it's still watching. They say the forest is alive, not with the rustling of trees or the scurrying of animals, but with something else. Something that watches, something that waits, something that follows. I never used to believe in those stories, but I do now, because I survived something that still haunts me to this day, and I don't know if I was ever truly alone out there. It happened 5 years ago. I was on a solo camping trip in the deep wilderness of the Pacific Northwest. I had experience in the wild, hiking, camping, surviving off the land. I wasn't some clueless tourist. The plan was simple. 3 days, alone, completely off-grid. No phone, no GPS, just me, my tent, my gear, and the endless stretch of forest. Everything was normal at first. The forest was quiet, peaceful even. The sound of distant birds, the crunch of leaves under my boots, the cool mountain air. I found a small clearing near a stream, set up camp, and enjoyed the stillness of nature. But as the sun dipped below the tree line, something changed. The forest went silent. No birds, no wind, no rustling of leaves, just dead silence. I brushed it off. Maybe it was normal. Maybe the wildlife settled down for the night. But that eerie silence settled into my bones, making me feel watched. Then, just as I was about to zip up my tent for the night, a twig snapped. Close, too close. I froze, heart hammering. I grabbed my flashlight, aimed it toward the trees. Nothing. Just endless, twisting trunks stretching into the darkness. I told myself it was probably an animal, maybe a deer, maybe a raccoon. But deep down, something felt off. I got into my tent and tried to sleep, but then the footsteps started. Slow, deliberate, circling my tent. I held my breath, my hand gripped the knife I kept beside me, then silence. I don't know how long I lay there waiting, listening. Eventually, exhaustion won. I drifted into uneasy sleep. But when I woke up the next morning, something was wrong. The trees had moved. My entire campsite, it looked different. The trees were closer. The clearing I had pitched my tent in was now smaller. As if the forest had crept in overnight. I tried to shake it off, but unease gnawed at me. I decided to explore a bit, maybe find some fresh water. That's when I saw them. Footprints, not mine, bare feet, human, deep in the mud, circling my campsite. I wasn't alone. My first instinct, grab my gear and get the hell out. But my pride kept me there. Maybe some weirdo was out here messing with me. If I left now, I'd be running from nothing. Big mistake. As I wandered deeper into the woods, I noticed something else, the trees. They weren't normal. Some were carved. Faces, twisted, agonized faces etched into the bark, dozens of them, some fresh, others old and faded. And then, hanging from a low branch, a deer skull. I turned to leave. That's when I heard it, a voice, soft, whispers, right behind me. You shouldn't be here. I spun around. No one. I ran, full sprint back to camp. I didn't care about the trail, didn't care about getting lost. I just needed to get the hell away. By the time I reached my tent, the sun was already setting. I packed my gear in minutes, ready to hike back to my car, but then I saw it. Something was waiting for me, standing at the edge of the trees, tall, unmoving, watching, not a person, not an animal. Its limbs were wrong, too long, its head tilted unnaturally, and then it moved, fast, straight for me. I bolted, my flashlight bouncing wildly, my breath ragged. I ran harder than I ever had in my life. Branches tore at my clothes, my face, my arms, but I didn't stop. The whole time I heard it behind me, not footsteps, not breathing, just a low, guttural clicking sound. Click, 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 like bones snapping together. After what felt like forever, I saw my car. I dove inside, locked the doors, and peeled out. As I sped down the dirt road, I looked in my rearview mirror. The thing was still standing there, at the tree line, watching. But the worst part, as I turned the corner, leaving the forest behind, it waved. I never went back to that forest. I don't know what I saw. I don't know what followed me that night, but I know one thing. If the forest ever goes silent, leave, because something is watching. And next time, it might not let you go. Click, click, click. Some places aren't meant to be found. Some trails don't lead back. And if you hear your own voice calling from the trees, run. I never used to believe in the stories people told about the deep woods, about the things that lurk where no one is supposed to go. But now I believe, because I barely made it out alive. It started as an ordinary trip. 4 of us, me, my best friend Chris, his brother Jake, and my girlfriend Emily, went on a backpacking trip deep into the remote wilderness of Montana. We wanted a challenge. No marked trails, no cell service, just untouched nature and the thrill of going somewhere few had ever stepped foot. On the second day, we found an unmarked trail. It wasn't on the map. The dirt path was narrow, barely visible beneath the thick undergrowth, like it hadn't been used in years. That should have been our first warning. But Chris was always the adventurous one. Chris, come on, let's see where it goes. So we followed. At first it seemed normal, just another trail winding through ancient trees, but as we walked, I noticed something strange. The forest was too quiet, no birds, no insects, no wind. Then we started seeing the carvings. Trees along the trail had deep scratches gouged into the bark. Not natural, not from animals. Some looked like tally marks, others like strange symbols. And then we found the campsite, or what was left of it. A clearing with a rotting tent, torn apart like something had clawed through it. Scattered belongings, rusted cooking gear, but no people. Then Jake found the notebook. It was weathered, pages damp, but the writing inside was still legible. The last entry sent chills through me. Something is in the trees. I hear it at night. It whispers in my voice. I tried to leave, but the trail changed. If you find this, don't listen. Don't follow the voices. Don't look for me. Chris laughed it off. Chris, some wannabe horror writer, probably left it as a joke. But Emily wasn't laughing, neither was I. That's when we heard it. Footsteps, not ours. Just beyond the trees, something was moving, watching, following. We grabbed our packs and got the hell out of there, or at least we tried. We walked fast, back the way we came, but after an hour, the trail was wrong. The landmarks were gone. The trees looked different. The path we had followed so clearly before wasn't the same. It was like the forest had rearranged itself. Then Chris stopped suddenly, pale as a ghost. "Chris, I hear us." We listened. And from somewhere deep in the woods, we heard voices, our voices, not echoes, not distortions, exact, perfect replicas, calling our names, Chris, Jake, Emily, me, coming from different directions, coming closer. Panic set in. We started running. No plan, just escape. But the deeper we ran, the worse it got. The trees, they had faces, not real faces, carved into the bark, staring, twisted, screaming. And then we saw the second campsite, identical to the first. Same torn tent, same rusted gear, same notebook. I flipped to the last page. A new entry. "You can't leave, it won't let you. Stop running, stop The writing stopped mid-sentence. The pen was still there, but the person wasn't. That's when the whispering started, all around us, our voices, but twisted, wrong. Emily started screaming. Jake grabbed her and pulled her away, and I grabbed Chris. "Move! Now!" We sprinted, blind with fear, then Chris tripped. I turned back to help him, but he wasn't alone. Something was crouching over him, tall, too tall, limbs bent the wrong way. It didn't have a face, just shifting shadows where its face should be. And it was whispering in Chris's voice. I yanked him up and we ran harder than ever. This time the trail was there, a straight shot back to our original campsite. We didn't question it. We ran until we saw our tents, until we saw the fire pit we built, until we knew we were safe, or so we thought. We didn't sleep. We just waited for dawn. When the sun finally rose, we packed in 5 minutes and left. But as we were hiking back, I noticed something that still chills me to this day. The trees along the trail. They had fresh carvings, our names. And at the base of one tree, a brand new notebook. We left it there. We didn't look inside. We didn't speak a word. We just kept walking. And when we finally reached the car, when we were miles away from that godforsaken place, Chris turned to me and whispered, "Chris, you heard it too, didn't you?" I nodded, because as we walked away, just before we left the forest behind, I heard it. A voice, my voice, from somewhere deep in the trees, whispering, "Don't go. Deep. You'll be back."